My name is Elena Calder. I was 31 years old the night my family announced that Calder House was about to be sold. They made the announcement during my younger brother's rehearsal dinner. 73 guests sat beneath white roses and brass lights, while my mother raised a champagne glass and declared that the restaurant was entering an exciting new chapter. My father stood beside her, smiling like the deal had already closed. My brother Mason wrapped one arm around his fiancée and accepted the applause as if someone had handed him a kingdom. Then my father placed a cream-colored folder in front of me. Inside was a 6-month consulting contract. A release of all claims involving the restaurant, its recipes, its brand, and the pending sale. And a 3-year non-compete agreement that would have prevented me from working in another restaurant within 50 miles. My mother sat beside me and lowered her voice. "You should sign tonight," she whispered. "We kept you involved because you were useful in the kitchen, Elena. Do not confuse that with ownership." I did not cry. I did not argue. I rested one hand on the thin black folder beside my plate and looked toward Daniel Levin, North Star Hospitality's acquisitions director. "Did your legal team receive Schedule D?" I asked, the disclosure identifying the separate owner of the Calder House name, logo, menus, and proprietary systems. His smile disappeared. He turned toward the attorney sitting beside him. My father stopped breathing. Mason lowered his glass. Behind the bar, the doors to the old private dining room remained closed. My parents had not asked why. They had not asked who was inside. And they had no idea that the pending sale depended on assets they did not own. If you have ever done the work while someone else collected the applause, this story is for you. Calder House stood at the corner of Juniper and 6th inside a renovated brick fire station. The arched windows were original. The copper roof turned green around the edges every winter. My grandmother Rose bought the building in 1988 with money she had saved from catering church weddings, school fundraisers, funeral receptions, and retirement parties. She used to say she had cooked for every human emotion before she owned a dining room. "People eat when they celebrate," she told me. "They eat when they grieve. They eat when they do not know what else to do with their hands." She opened Calder House with 12 tables, a 4-burner stove, and one handwritten menu. By the time I was a child, it had become the kind of restaurant where people celebrated anniversaries, graduations, engagements, promotions, and reconciliations they had delayed too long. It was not elegant in the way my mother wanted elegance. The walls were exposed brick. The tables did not match. Rose served rosemary biscuits in chipped blue bowls because she believed perfect dishes made people afraid to relax. Every Friday, she walked through the dining room and touched the back of each chair as though greeting an old friend. I loved the restaurant before I understood that a person could love a building. The kitchen was where I first learned that heat could change something without destroying it. Butter could brown. Onions could become sweet. A tough piece of meat could soften if given enough time, salt, and patience. For years, I believed families worked the same way. I thought that if I stayed long enough, worked hard enough, and absorbed enough heat without complaining, the people around me would eventually soften. That was my first mistake. My parents, Elaine and Robert Calder, had 2 children. I was the oldest. Emotionally, Mason had been born first. He was 3 years younger, but our household rearranged itself around him from the moment he arrived. His needs became urgent. His mistakes became charming. His interests became family priorities. When I was 10, I asked to take a Saturday baking class at the community center. The class cost $45. My mother said we needed to be responsible. 2 weeks later, she paid $300 for Mason to join a youth hockey league because he had watched one game on television and decided he might be talented. He quit after 4 practices. The equipment remained in the garage until he outgrew it. When I was 14, I won a regional cooking competition with a peach and thyme hand pie based on Rose's recipe. The local newspaper published a small article about me. My father clipped it and displayed it beside the restaurant register beneath a handwritten sign. The next generation of Calder House. Mason's school photograph was taped beside mine. He had not entered the competition. He had not helped with the recipe. He did not even like peaches. When I asked why his photograph was there, my father looked confused. "He is a Calder," he said. "Customers like knowing the family name will continue." My photograph was also beneath the Calder name. Apparently, that did not count. I was already learning the rule that would shape the next 17 years of my life. My work belonged to the family. Recognition belonged to Mason. Rose tried to correct the imbalance when she could. She kept a wooden stool beside the kitchen pass, so I could sit near her during prep. She taught me how to sharpen a knife, how to smell cream before it scorched, how to tell when dough needed more time. People think dough is silent, she once said, pressing my palm against warm brioche. It is not. You have to stop forcing it long enough to feel what it needs. Rose never praised me vaguely. She did not tell me I was special. She told me exactly what I had done well. You tasted before adding salt. You repaired the sauce without panicking. You noticed table 6 had been waiting. You made that server feel less ashamed after she dropped the tray. Her attention made me feel visible in a way my parents' approval never did. My mother praised appearances. My father praised obedience. My grandmother praised awareness. At 18, I was accepted into a respected culinary institute in Chicago. The school offered partial financial aid. I also received an outside scholarship that covered most of my first-year expenses. Rose cried when the acceptance letter arrived. She baked a lemon cake and wrote "Go" across the top in uneven blue icing. My parents did not celebrate. My mother spent 3 days explaining how expensive Chicago would be. My father reminded me Calder House was understaffed. Mason, then 15, had decided he wanted to attend a private sports academy. My parents said the family could not support 2 dreams at once. They never said whose dream they had chosen. A month before I was supposed to leave, my father called me into the restaurant office. He closed the door and placed a letter on the desk. My outside scholarship had been withdrawn, he said. Without it, there was no way I could afford tuition. I held the letter with both hands because they had begun shaking. The language was formal. It said there had been a change in available funding. It apologized for the inconvenience. I asked whether I could call the scholarship committee. My father said he already had. They are firm, he told me. My mother called my decision to stay mature. My father called it loyalty. Mason barely noticed. I told myself I would work at Calder House for 1 year, save money, and apply again. 1 year became 3. 3 became 7. 7 became 12. At first, I washed herbs, portioned dough, and closed the kitchen after midnight. Then I began writing seasonal menus. I negotiated with suppliers. I built an inventory system that reduced food waste by almost 30%. I redesigned Sunday brunch when it started losing money. I created the roasted garlic broth that became our most popular winter dish. I developed the brown butter apple cake that food bloggers drove 2 hours to photograph. I learned payroll when our bookkeeper resigned. I learned scheduling when my father approved everyone's vacation requests for the same week. I repaired a leaking dishwasher with a flashlight between my teeth because calling a technician on a holiday weekend would have emptied the account. I did everything except stand in front of cameras. That role belonged to Mason. He went to college for business administration, changed majors twice, and returned home without graduating. My parents made him director of brand development before he had completed 1 full restaurant shift. His first idea was to replace Rose's chipped blue biscuit bowls with matte black stoneware. His second was to begin charging for bread. His third was to hire a photographer. The photographs showed Mason standing in the kitchen with his sleeves rolled up, looking thoughtfully into the distance. In one picture, he was holding my knife. The caption said he was honoring tradition while leading Calder House into the future. Customers loved him. He was handsome in the effortless way some men are handsome when they have never been required to make themselves smaller. He remembered names. He hugged regulars. He knew how to discuss hard work without sweating. Whenever a reporter wanted a quote, my father called Mason. Whenever a critic praised the food, my mother said the restaurant was thriving under her son's leadership. Whenever service failed, they came looking for me. I accepted it because I believed the work mattered more than the credit. That belief protected me for a long time. It also trapped me. One winter, I wrote a complete operations manual for Calder House. 187 pages. It covered food preparation, supplier standards, allergy procedures, service recovery, cleaning schedules, staff training, opening routines, closing routines, and the production methods behind our most successful dishes. My father called it essential to the restaurant's future. Mason put his name on the cover. Rose was the only person who seemed frightened by how much of myself I had poured into Calder House. One night, after a private event ran 2 hours late, she found me sitting inside the walk-in refrigerator. I had gone in to count salmon portions. I stayed because it was the only quiet room in the building. Rose lowered herself onto an overturned produce crate beside me. She was 79, with silver hair pinned loosely behind her neck. "This place loves you because you keep it alive," she said. I smiled because I thought she was comforting me. Then she touched my wrist. That is not the same as the people inside it loving you properly. I looked away. I'm fine, she said. Useful women always say that right before they disappear. I laughed because I did not know what else to do. She did not. Rose died 18 months before Mason's rehearsal dinner. Her death was quiet. She went to sleep after watching an old cooking show and did not wake up. The morning my father called, both of my hands were inside a bowl of biscuit dough. I remember looking at the flour between my fingers and thinking the world should not have been allowed to remain so ordinary. My mother organized the funeral around what she called the family image. Mason delivered the eulogy. He told 3 stories. 2 had happened to me. I sat in the first row while he described Rose teaching him to make gravy, even though he could not make gravy without a packet. After the service, people hugged him and said he was carrying her legacy forward. I returned to Calder House and prepared food for the reception. For months afterward, I waited for someone to mention Rose's estate. My father said everything was simple. The building had already been transferred to him. Rose's personal belongings had little financial value. There was no large inheritance. I did not question him. I did not want money. I wanted her recipe cards, her blue bowls, and the brass kitchen timer shaped like a pear. My mother said she would sort through Rose's belongings when she had time. She never did. Calder House changed after Rose was gone. Not immediately. Places, like people, can keep moving for a while, after the heart stops directing them. But slowly, my parents became less interested in what the restaurant had been and more interested in what it might be worth. Mason began using phrases like scalability, brand extraction, and national footprint. My mother invited commercial brokers to lunch. My father asked me to document every production method. 5 months before the rehearsal dinner, a woman from North Star Hospitality came into the kitchen. She asked how long our smoked onion stock could be produced off-site without losing quality. She said Mason had told her I was the executive chef. That was the first time I had heard of my promotion. My official payroll title was kitchen manager. I asked my father about the woman. He said she was a consultant. What kind? Do not worry about things outside your role. That sentence stayed with me. For 12 years, the restaurant had been my responsibility whenever something went wrong. Now ownership was outside my role. 3 days later, a certified letter arrived at my apartment. It came from a storage company on the south side of town. The letter explained that Rose Calder had prepaid Unit 114 for 18 months after her death. Her instructions required the company to contact me when that period ended. If I did not update the account within 30 days, the contents would be auctioned. I had never heard of Unit 114. I drove there the next morning. The storage facility was a long gray building behind a tire shop. The manager examined my identification and returned with a brass key. Your grandmother added you as the successor contact 6 years ago, he said. She asked us not to notify you until the prepaid period ended. Unit 114 was barely larger than a closet. Inside were 4 banker's boxes, a narrow wooden table, 2 framed photographs, and an old metal recipe cabinet from Calder House's first kitchen. Everything smelled faintly of paper, cedar, and the lavender hand cream Rose used. One box held old menus. Another contained photographs of the fire station during renovation. The third was filled with customer letters, thank you notes, marriage proposals written on napkins, and photographs of children who had grown up eating Sunday breakfast at Calder House. My name was written on the 4th box. Inside was the blue biscuit bowl from my childhood, the brass pear-shaped timer, my culinary school acceptance letter, and a sealed envelope. Rose had written across the front, Elena, open this only if they decide the restaurant is worth more than you are. I sat on the floor. For several minutes, I held the envelope without opening it. Part of me understood that whatever was inside would divide my life into before and after. The letter was 6 pages long. Rose began with an apology. She wrote that for years, she had believed she could protect me through quiet corrections. When my mother rejected one of my ideas, Rose used it anyway. When my father underpaid me, Rose slipped additional money into my checks. When Mason took credit, Rose kept records. But quiet corrections had allowed a loud injustice to continue. Then she explained that Calder House was not one asset. My father owned the building. My parents' operating company owned the furniture, kitchen equipment, liquor license, cash accounts, and general business operations. But the Calder House name, the Rose and Flame logo, Rose's original menus, the proprietary spice blends, confidential production methods, and the training systems created before her retirement belonged to a separate company, Rose Calder Culinary Holdings. I had never heard that name. Rose formed the company 9 years earlier after my father first proposed turning Calder House into a chain. She transferred the brand, logo, recipes, and protected operating materials into it. When I was 22, she asked me to sign an intellectual property contribution agreement, documenting the menus and systems we had developed together. She told me the papers ensured my work could never be separated from my name. I signed because I trusted her. What I had not understood was that Rose also placed 60% of the company's shares into an irrevocable voting trust for my benefit. Rose remained the voting trustee and managing director while she lived. That meant the company could remain active, without requiring me to receive notices, distributions, or annual tax documents. Andrea Kim, Rose's attorney, served as registered agent. When Rose died, the voting trust ended. The 60% transferred directly to me. Rose's remaining 40% transferred to me through a beneficiary designation held in the corporate records. I became the sole shareholder. The original share certificates remained in Andrea's custody because Rose knew my parents controlled mail at both the restaurant and the family home. Calder House had operated under a written license from Rose Calder Culinary Holdings. The license allowed my parents' company to use the name, logo, menus, and protected systems under 3 conditions. They could not sell, transfer, sublicense, or expand the brand without written approval from the rights holder. They had to pay an annual licensing fee. And they had to preserve meaningful culinary authority for the company's designated representative. That representative was me. My hands went cold. At the bottom of the letter, Rose had written, "You may be tempted to use this only to save the restaurant. Be careful. Buildings are not always homes. Traditions are not always love. Before you protect Calder House, decide whether Calder House has ever protected you." The letter included Andrea Kim's telephone number. I called her from the storage unit. She answered on the second ring. When I said my name, she became very quiet. "I hoped you would find the unit," she said. "Why did you not contact me directly?" I tried. After Rose's death, Andrea sent formal notices to Calder House and to my parents' home, because both addresses appeared in the corporate file. My father replied that I was overwhelmed and had authorized him to manage communications. Andrea requested written authorization from me. None arrived. She sent 2 certified letters to the apartment address my mother supplied. It was an address I had left 3 years earlier. Andrea then called the restaurant. Mason returned the call and told her the family did not intend to pursue any minor administrative issues connected to Rose's old company. Andrea refused to discuss confidential information with him. After that, she followed Rose's instructions. She preserved the company, maintained the registrations, held the share records, and waited until I contacted her. Rose believed the right moment would reveal itself, Andrea said. I looked around the storage unit. I think it has. Andrea asked me to come to her office that afternoon. Her office was on the 7th floor of a narrow building downtown. She wore a navy suit, red glasses, and the expression of someone who had spent years watching people lie badly. She placed the corporate records in front of me. Trademark registrations, licensing agreements, board resolutions, the voting trust instrument, share certificates, the intellectual property contribution agreement bearing my signature. The company was active. The documents were valid. And I was its sole shareholder. Andrea showed me the annual licensing records. My father had signed an acknowledgement each year, confirming that the Calder House brand remained separate from the building and operating company. He knew. Then she showed me the payment history. No licensing fees had been paid during the last 4 years. Why was the license not terminated? I asked. Rose deliberately declined to terminate it while she was alive, Andrea said. She was afraid an abrupt shutdown would harm the staff. Instead, she issued written extensions and preserved the violations. And after she died? I could maintain the company, but I could not make a major enforcement decision for its new owner without your authority. I sent notices. Your father intercepted them. I continued documenting the defaults. The unpaid fees were not large enough to destroy the restaurant. That was never the point. The point was that my father knew the license existed. He knew it could not be transferred. He knew he did not own the most valuable part of Calder House. Andrea showed me a draft purchase agreement between my parents' operating company and North Star Hospitality. The proposed value was $8.4 million. the deal had not closed. It was a conditional transaction subject to title review, financial verification, and a complete intellectual property disclosure. The building represented less than 1/3 of the proposed value. Most of the price came from the name, customer goodwill, menu identity, training systems, proprietary recipes, and expansion potential, assets my parents did not own. Andrea opened the seller's disclosure schedule. Schedule D was supposed to identify every trademark, license, recipe rights agreement, and intellectual property restriction connected to the sale. My father had submitted it with one sentence. All intellectual property assets are wholly owned by Calder Hospitality Operations, Incorporated. It was false. North Star's full intellectual property review was scheduled to be completed before closing on the Monday after Mason's wedding. My parents planned to obtain my signature first. The release in the draft closing file would have waived any ownership, compensation, or intellectual property claim I might later make. "They are counting on you signing before North Star asks the final questions," Andrea said. I stared at the draft. For 12 years my parents had treated me as though I should feel lucky to have a place in the kitchen. Now they needed my signature to convert my invisible work into millions of dollars. Then Andrea called my grandmother's longtime accountant. His name was Samuel Ortiz. Samuel had retired to Arizona, but Rose had asked him to preserve certain financial records. He joined us by video that afternoon. Andrea asked him about my culinary scholarship. Samuel's face changed. The next day, he flew back with a brown leather briefcase. Inside were copies of the scholarship committee's correspondence, the check record, and Calder House's bank statements from the year I was supposed to leave for Chicago. I had applied for the scholarship at 17. Because I was still a minor during part of the application process, the Scholarship Foundation issued the money into an education account requiring my father's joint authorization. The scholarship was never withdrawn. The committee requested proof of enrollment and released a check for my first-year expenses. My father deposited it. 2 weeks later, he transferred almost the same amount into Calder House's operating account. Within the same month, my parents paid Mason's private sports academy tuition. Rose discovered the transfer several years later during an accounting review. She confronted my father. He told her the restaurant had needed the money and that I was better suited to practical work anyway. Rose wanted to tell me. My mother persuaded her that exposing the truth would destroy the family. "So they protected the family by hiding what the family did to me," I said. Samuel did not defend them. That is how families often misuse the word protection. I did not cry in Andrea's office. I wanted to. The grief pressed against my ribs until breathing felt mechanical. But underneath the grief was something steadier. Clarity. People imagine betrayal as an explosion. Sometimes it is. Sometimes betrayal is a room you have lived in for years, and one day someone finally turns on the light. Andrea explained my options. I could approve the sale in exchange for compensation. Negotiate an ownership position in the new company. Demand the unpaid licensing fees. Terminate the license. Sue over the false disclosures and attempted unauthorized transfer. Or wait. "That is useful?" I asked. "Very," she said. "People reveal a great deal when they believe you still know nothing." So I returned to work. I ordered produce. Corrected schedules. Tested spring dishes. Attended meetings where Mason repeated phrases from my operations manual, as if he had invented them. I smiled at North Star's consultants. I did not mention Rose Calder Culinary Holdings. Meanwhile, Andrea and I documented everything. The proposed transaction, the false Schedule D, the menus I created, the protected recipes, the years of unpaid fees, the representations made to North Star, the release they planned to pressure me into signing. Samuel confirmed the original corporate separation. He also brought handwritten notes from meetings with Rose. One read, "Robert believes the restaurant name follows the building," corrected him again. "He does not like being corrected." Another said, "Elaine wants Mason positioned publicly. Rose insists Elena retain culinary authority." The final note was dated 2 months before Rose died. "If they attempt a sale after my death, Elena must choose freely. Do not pressure her to preserve a family that has not preserved her." I read the sentence 3 times. Rose had loved me. She had also remained quiet for too long. She had built a legal shield around my work. She had preserved evidence. She had left me a choice. But she had still allowed me to lose 12 years believing I had never been worth the cost of my own education. Love can be real, and still be imperfect. I did not need to turn Rose into a saint to know she had loved me. I also did not need to excuse every silence, because it came from someone I loved. 2 months before the rehearsal dinner, Mason announced his engagement to Camille Foster. Camille worked as an elementary school librarian. She was kind, observant, and far less impressed by the Calder legacy than my mother preferred. My parents offered to host the rehearsal dinner at Calder House. Mason wanted the entire restaurant closed for the evening. My mother hired a floral designer. She replaced Rose's blue bowls with rented white china. She ordered a champagne tower that cost more than 3 months of my first restaurant wages. I was placed in charge of the menu. Of course I was. 3 weeks before the dinner, I found a proof copy of the printed program beside the office printer. The final page contained an announcement. Calder House, a new generation. It said Mason and Camille would help guide Calder House into national expansion following its acquisition by North Star Hospitality. There was no mention of me. I photographed the page and sent it to Andrea. She called 5 minutes later. They intend to announce before closing, she said. Why? To create public momentum. To make backing out humiliating. And to make you believe the decision is already complete. The rehearsal dinner was Friday. The closing was scheduled for Monday. Andrea recommended sending a cease and desist notice immediately. I asked her to wait, not because I wanted revenge. I wanted something I had never received from my family. The truth, without editing. I wanted to hear how they described my place when they still believed I had no power. So we prepared. Andrea privately contacted North Star's legal counsel. She asked whether the buyer had received a complete Schedule D, identifying all separately owned intellectual property. North Star's attorney said the sellers had represented that no separate licensing company existed. Andrea disclosed that there was a material ownership problem. She did not reveal every document. She requested that North Star send its attorney and acquisition representatives to the rehearsal dinner because my parents intended to make a public announcement. North Star agreed. Samuel returned to town. I called Mateo Ruiz, Calder House's former head chef. Mateo had worked beside me for 8 years before leaving after a fight with Mason. Mason wanted to replace experienced prep workers with cheaper part-time staff. Mateo refused. My father accused him of resisting modernization. I stayed silent during the meeting because my father threatened to cut everyone's hours if I interfered. Mateo resigned that afternoon. I helped him carry his knives to his car. He looked at me across the open trunk. One day, they will ask you to sacrifice the last piece of yourself, he said. We had not spoken in 10 months. When I called, he answered with my name. Elena. I told him everything. The holding company, the pending sale, the scholarship, the release, the noncompete. He did not interrupt. When I finished, he asked, "What do you want? Not how much money can you get? Not how badly can you hurt them? What do you want?" For 12 years, I had known what Calder House needed. I knew what my parents wanted. I knew what Mason expected. I had almost no practice answering a question about myself. I want to cook somewhere I am not treated like rented equipment. Mateo was quiet. Good, he said. That is something we can build. He knew of a vacant greenhouse cafe near the river. The lease was reasonable. The kitchen needed work. The dining room had glass walls, uneven stone floors, a fig tree growing through an opening near the back wall, and enough space for 14 tables. Rose had started with 12. I visited the next morning. Sunlight fell through the glass roof in pale rectangles. The previous owner had left a long wooden table. I touched its edge and remembered Rose walking through Calder House with her fingers resting on the chairs. Andrea helped me form a new operating company. I named the restaurant Rose and Salt. Rose for my grandmother. Salt because it preserves, reveals, and stings when placed in a wound. I did not tell my parents. I told the staff. Individually. I explained that Calder House was under a conditional sale agreement. I showed them the restructuring plan North Star had received from my father. The proposed plan eliminated nearly half the current positions within 6 months. My parents knew. They had not warned anyone. I offered no promises I could not keep. Rose and Salt would be smaller. The beginning would be difficult. Pay would be transparent. Profit sharing would begin only after the restaurant stabilized. No one was required to leave Calder House. 22 cooks, servers, bakers, hosts, bartenders, and dishwashers chose to help build the new restaurant. Mateo joined as culinary partner. He agreed to one condition before I could even ask. The final menu authority is yours, he said. You do not need another man becoming the face of your work. The night before the rehearsal dinner, the 22 of us met inside the unfinished greenhouse. There were no polished glasses. No sign above the door. No finished walls. We ate takeout pizza around the long wooden table while rain tapped against the glass roof. Lorraine, our pastry chef, placed Rose's brass pear timer in front of me. You need one thing from the old kitchen, she said. I looked at the people who had chosen uncertainty over another year of being treated as replaceable. Tomorrow, we do our jobs, I said. No one sabotages service. No one creates a scene. No one is required to resign. Benji, a dishwasher who had started at 16, raised his soda can. And after tomorrow? After tomorrow, we build something honest. The rehearsal dinner began at 6. By 5:30, Calder House no longer looked like Rose's restaurant. White roses covered the brick walls. Tall candles blocked sightlines across the tables. A gold sign near the entrance displayed Mason and Camille's names. The blue biscuit bowls were gone. 73 guests would fill the dining room. I arrived in a dark green dress carrying one black folder. My father noticed it immediately. He stood near the bar beside two North Star executives. His eyes moved from my face to the folder. What is that? Work. This is a family evening. For 12 years, every family evening had become work the moment someone needed me. I'm aware. My mother approached. You wore green. Yes. The photographs are white and gold. I know. Even on the night she planned to remove me from the restaurant, my failure to match the color scheme offended her. Do not make anything difficult tonight. What would count as difficult? Her expression hardened. You know. I did. Difficult meant visible. Camille found me in the kitchen 10 minutes later. She was wearing a pale blue dress and carrying one broken shoe. I need to ask you something. I handed her a spoonful of sauce. She tasted it automatically. More acid. I added lemon. What do you need? Mason said your parents are selling Calder House to help us begin our future. Did he? He said the sale was always the plan. It was not. Her expression changed. He also said you wanted to step away. Did you ever hear me say that? No. Then you have your answer. She looked toward the dining room doors. There is something else. Mason told me North Star is keeping the staff. They are not. I told her about the restructuring document. I did not tell her about my ownership. Not yet. Camille covered her mouth. He knew? Yes. I asked him directly. I said nothing. Women in my family had spent years softening facts so other people could remain comfortable. I would not do that for Mason. What you do with the truth is your decision, I said. Camille looked at the black folder beneath my arm. Is tonight going to be terrible? For some people. Will they have earned it? Yes. She looked down at her broken shoe. Then I should probably find another pair. Dinner began with speeches. Mason thanked our parents for creating a legacy. My father praised Mason's vision. My mother praised Camille's grace. I sat near the end of the main table beside Samuel. He had been introduced as an old family friend. Andrea sat 3 tables away, with North Star's attorney and 2 members of the acquisition team. Behind the bar, the doors to the old private dining room remained closed. My parents believed it held floral supplies. The 22 staff members who had chosen Rose and Salt were waiting inside. The first course was Rose's roasted carrot soup. Mason accepted compliments for selecting it. The second was braised short rib with smoked onion stock. A North Star executive told my father the dish alone justified preserving the brand. My father nodded as though he had created it. By dessert, I was no longer nervous. The truth surrounded him. He simply had not noticed. My mother stood beside the champagne tower and tapped a spoon against her glass. Before we toast Mason and Camille, Robert and I have one more piece of family news. The room quieted. Mason placed his arm around Camille. She did not lean into him. My father stood. For more than 35 years, Calder House has represented warmth, excellence, and family tradition. Tonight, we are proud to announce an agreement that will carry that tradition into the future. Applause began before he finished. A screen behind him displayed the North Star Hospitality logo beside the Calder House rose and flame mark. Rose had drawn that logo on the back of an envelope. My father continued. Subject to final closing, North Star will bring Calder House to new communities while preserving everything our guests love. Mason will serve as brand ambassador during the transition. More applause. Mason raised his glass. My name was not on the screen. Then my father said, Elena will remain with the company in a consulting role to ensure operational continuity. That was the first time he had discussed my future with me. Guests turned and applauded. Regular customers, family friends, people who had watched me work holidays and solve emergencies. They believed I had agreed. My mother approached carrying a cream-colored folder. "This makes it official," she said brightly. She placed it before me. My father handed me a pen. "Only a few transition documents." I opened the folder. The consulting agreement offered 6 months of employment at almost the same salary I already earned. The release waived every claim related to the sale, brand, recipes, intellectual property, compensation, and prior agreements. The non-compete prevented me from working in food service within 50 miles for 3 years. They intended to sell my work, keep me for 6 months, then prevent me from rebuilding nearby. My typed name appeared beneath the signature line. There was no forged signature. They expected me to provide the real one. My mother sat beside me. "You should sign tonight," she whispered. "What happens if I do not?" Her smile tightened. "Elena, I'm asking." My father lowered his voice. "This is already done. Then why do you need my signature?" His jaw shifted. "Attorneys like complete files." Samuel lowered his eyes. Mason gave a short laugh. "Can we not turn this into a whole thing?" Camille looked at him. "A whole thing?" He ignored her. "This is good for everyone, Elena. You hate being public. You always said you preferred the kitchen." I said I preferred cooking to pretending I cooked. The nearest table stopped whispering. Mason's face reddened. My mother touched my wrist. "Not tonight. You brought me the contract tonight. We wanted you included." They had excluded me from the negotiations, the sale, the announcement, and the future. But because they had placed a pen in front of me, they called it inclusion. My father leaned closer. "Do not embarrass this family." I looked at Rose's logo glowing behind him. "Which part of the family?" He straightened. Mason exhaled. My mother softened her voice. It was the voice she used when cruelty needed a ribbon around it. "You have always been talented in practical ways. No one denies that. Practical ways." As though the restaurant had survived through a series of convenient accidents. "But leadership requires a different personality," she continued. "Mason understands growth. You are better behind the scenes." Behind him, behind the brand. The brand I built menus for. The family created this restaurant. Rose created it, and we kept it alive. I glanced toward the kitchen. Mateo had warned me they would eventually ask for the final piece. The contract lay open before me. My name, my work, my future, all reduced to a signature line. My mother followed my gaze. "We kept you involved because you were useful in the kitchen," she whispered. "Do not confuse that with ownership." The room seemed to tilt, not because the words surprised me, because they finally matched every action that had come before. Useful at 14 when I won the competition. Useful at 18 when my scholarship funded Mason's Academy. Useful at 22 when I developed a new menu. Useful at 26 when I saved Sunday brunch. Useful at 31 when my work helped make Calder House worth $8.4 million. But never daughter enough to be told the truth. I closed the cream folder. My father pushed the pen toward me. "Sign." I placed my hand on the black folder. "Before I do, I have a question for North Star." The room became quiet in stages. My father's expression changed. "Elena, this is not." I turned toward Daniel Levin. "Did your legal team receive Schedule D, the disclosure identifying the separate owner of the Calder House name, logo, menus, and proprietary systems?" Daniel did not answer immediately. He looked toward the attorney beside him. She opened the acquisition file. My brother lowered his glass. My mother's hand left my wrist. Daniel said, "We were told no separate licensing company existed." My father stood. "This is an internal family matter." North Star's attorney looked directly at him. "Ownership of the transferred assets is not an internal family matter." A murmur moved through the dining room. My father's voice hardened. "We own Calder House." "You own the building," I said. For the first time that night, fear crossed his face. I opened the black folder. I placed the corporate registration for Rose Calder Culinary Holdings on the table. Then, the trademark records. Then the licensing agreement. Then, the voting trust termination and share certificates identifying me as sole shareholder. I did not raise my voice. I aligned the corners beside my untouched dessert. My father stared at the documents. Mason leaned over his shoulder. My mother looked at me instead of the papers, as if refusing to see them could stop them from existing. North Star's attorney approached. "May I review these?" I nodded. My father began speaking. "These documents are outdated. Rose created unnecessary structures near the end of her life." Samuel lifted his head. "She created the company 9 years before she died." My father turned. "Sam?" Samuel opened his leather briefcase. "I prepared the structure, Robert." My mother looked toward the private dining room. The doors opened. Andrea stepped out first. Behind her came Matteo, Lorraine, Benji, and 19 other cooks, servers, bakers, hosts, bartenders, and dishwashers. 22 people. Some wore kitchen whites. Others still had aprons tied around their waists. They did not cheer. They did not smile. They entered and stood along the brick wall. My mother lost all color. "What is this?" "Due diligence," Andrea said. My father pointed toward me. "You planned this." "Yes." "You ambushed us at your brother's rehearsal dinner." I looked at the unsigned release. "You announced a sale and demanded my signature at my brother's rehearsal dinner. That is different. Because you expected me to obey." Mason shoved his chair back. "This is insane. You are destroying an $8 million deal because your name was not on a screen?" Camille turned toward him. "Is that what you think this is about?" He looked at her, as if he had forgotten she was present. "Elena has always hated attention." "No," I said. "I hated watching you accept credit for work you knew was mine. I built the public identity. You posed with my knife." Someone nearby laughed before stopping. Mason's face twisted. "At least I knew how to make people care." Matteo spoke from the wall. "They cared about the food." Mason turned. "You do not work here." "No," Matteo said. "That was your first good decision." North Star's attorney continued reading. She stopped at the transfer restrictions. "This license requires written approval from Rose Calder Culinary Holdings for any sale, sublicense, national expansion, or transfer of brand assets." She looked at my father. "Do you have that approval?" He did not answer. She asked again. "No," he said. The word was barely audible. Daniel Levin's expression became still. "Then what were you selling us?" My mother stood. "A successful restaurant with decades of goodwill. The goodwill attached to the Calder House brand is licensed," Andrea said. "The operating company does not own it." My father looked at me. "We can resolve this privately." Minutes earlier, I had only been useful. Now I was someone with whom he wanted privacy. North Star's attorney reviewed the immediate termination clause. The license defined an attempted unauthorized sale and a material ownership misrepresentation as incurable breaches. No 30-day remedy period. No extension. Written notice could terminate the license immediately. My father gripped his chair. "We paid everything Rose required." Samuel removed the payment ledger. "No annual licensing fees have been paid in 4 years. That was an accounting mistake." "You signed the default acknowledgments." My father looked at him with open hatred. My mother came around the table. "Your grandmother never intended for you to use those papers against your family." I removed Rose's letter from the folder. "She told me to decide whether Calder House had ever protected me." My mother recognized the handwriting. "I did not give her the letter. Some words were not hers to touch." "This restaurant protected all of us," she said. "No, I protected the restaurant. We gave you a career. You took my scholarship money." The dining room went silent again. Not curious silence. Heavy silence. The kind that arrives when a family secret realizes it has been spoken aloud. My father's face turned gray. Mason looked between us. "What scholarship money?" My mother closed her eyes briefly. "Elena, that was years ago. That is not an answer. The restaurant needed the money. The check was for my education. We meant to replace it." "You used it for Mason's academy." Mason stepped backward. "No." My father said his name sharply. Mason ignored him and looked at me. "You are lying." Andrea placed the scholarship correspondence and bank records on the table. Mason read them. His expression moved from disbelief to shame. "I did not know." "I know." That was true. He had benefited from the decision. He had accepted my work and rarely questioned the advantages given to him. But he had been 15 when the money was taken. I would not make him responsible for the one betrayal he had not chosen. My mother reached for my hand. I moved it away. "We made mistakes." That was the first retreat. Not decisions. Not lies. Mistakes. "We were under pressure," she said. "Your father was saving the restaurant. Mason had opportunities. You were always capable. We knew you would find your way. You knew I would stay. We knew you loved your family. You knew I had been trained to feel guilty for leaving. Her eyes filled. My mother's tears had controlled rooms for most of my life. They appeared when facts became uncomfortable. She looked around at the guests. This should never have become public. For one moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Not because the sale was collapsing, because she still believed exposure was worse than betrayal. Camille stood. Did Mason know North Star planned to eliminate staff? My mother looked confused by the change. Mason answered. Camille, not now. That means yes. It was only a restructuring proposal. You told me everyone was protected. We were going to discuss it later. You looked me in the eye. This has nothing to do with us. Camille's expression became painfully calm. It has everything to do with us. She removed her engagement ring. My mother made a small sound. Camille placed the ring beside Mason's glass. I need time to decide whether I know the person I was supposed to marry. She walked toward the lobby. Mason started to follow. My father caught his arm. Do not make this worse. Mason looked down at his father's hand. For once, he seemed to hear the sentence the way I had heard it for years. He pulled away and followed Camille. My mother turned to me. Are you happy now? There it was. The accusation beneath every family demand. If I stopped absorbing the damage, I must be the one causing it. No, I said. I am finished. Daniel Levin closed his file. North Star is suspending the transaction pending full legal review. My father stepped toward him. You cannot do that. We can. The agreement is conditional. This announcement will damage our reputation. Daniel looked at the false Schedule D, the staff along the wall, and the unsigned release. Your reputation is not our immediate concern. He left with North Star's attorney and acquisition team. Guests began collecting their coats. My mother tried to stop them. She said dessert had not been served. I will always remember that. The sale had collapsed. Her son's engagement was in question. The staff had learned they were expendable. The scholarship theft was public. And my mother was worried people had not eaten cake. My father stood over me. What do you want? The question sounded nothing like it had when Matteo asked. Matteo wanted to understand me. My father wanted a price. How much? He asked. 5%? 10? A board seat? We can renegotiate. You still think I came to join your sale? You cannot operate the brand alone. I know. His eyes moved toward Matteo. So you take the Calder House name and compete against us. There will be no competition. I removed Andrea's formal termination notice from the black folder. As of midnight, your operating company's license to use the Calder House, name, logo, protected menus, training systems, and proprietary methods, is terminated. My father read the opening paragraph. You would shut down your grandmother's restaurant? No. You tried to sell the building and brand without authority. The transaction has not closed. You announced it as complete. You misrepresented ownership. You planned to remove me, reduce the staff, and turn her work into a chain. You are being emotional. Andrea stepped closer. Every action Miss Calder has taken was reviewed by counsel. He ignored her. This building is Calder House. No, I said. It is a building where Calder House used to live. My mother's face crumpled. What are we supposed to do? For most of my life, that question would have broken me. I would have started solving. Designed a transition. Offered unprotected recipes. Volunteered to stay. Protected them from what they had chosen. Instead, I looked at the 22 people standing along the wall. People whose jobs my parents had traded away without warning. You can decide what to build with the things you actually own. My father lowered his voice. If you walk out that door, you are no longer part of this family. The sentence landed quietly. No glass shattered. No one gasped. But something inside me became still. I had feared that threat for years. I worked holidays because of it. I gave up Chicago because of it. I watched Mason collect my credit because of it. I mistook access for love and obligation for belonging. Rose had warned me. Useful women always say they are fine right before they disappear. I stood. My knees did not shake. I placed the unsigned contract before my father. You made me an employee whenever ownership mattered, I said. You made me family whenever sacrifice was required. My mother began crying. My father stared at me. I picked up Rose's letter, the pair timer, and my black folder. You do not get to switch between those definitions anymore. Then I walked toward the private dining room. The staff stepped aside to create a path. No one applauded. I was grateful. Applause would have made it another performance. Matteo opened the door. Inside was a long table with 25 chairs. 22 for the staff, one for Andrea, one for Samuel, and one empty chair at the head. A chipped blue biscuit bowl sat in front of it. Benji rubbed the back of his neck. We thought you should have a seat that was actually yours. That was when I cried. Not when my mother called me useful. Not when the scholarship records appeared. Not when my father removed me from the family. I cried because 22 people had saved me a chair without asking what I could do for them first. I sat down. Matteo sat to my right. Lorraine sat to my left. Samuel lowered himself into the chair across from me. Andrea brought in the untouched apple cake from the kitchen. Outside the room, Calder House was dissolving into confusion. Guests were leaving. My mother argued with the event planner. My father called North Star. Mason had not returned. Inside, Lorraine placed one candle in the cake. "It is not your birthday," she said, "but something was born tonight." I laughed through my tears. Matteo lit the candle. No one sang. I made one wish. Never again to mistake being needed for being loved. The next morning, my father sent 17 messages. The first were angry. He accused me of sabotaging the family, manipulating the staff, humiliating Mason, and exploiting Rose's confusion. The next messages were practical. He wanted temporary permission to use the menus. A 90-day extension. A new licensing negotiation. The final messages were emotional. My mother had not slept. Mason's wedding might be cancelled. Family disputes should not destroy everything Rose had built. I did not answer. My mother left a voicemail. She cried, then said, "After everything we did for you, I cannot believe you chose strangers over your own blood." I listened once. Then deleted it. The people she called strangers knew how I drank my coffee. They knew I hated having my birthday sung in public. They knew I needed 5 quiet minutes after a difficult service. They knew which wrist hurt after kneading dough too long. My parents knew I could repair payroll. Blood had memorized my usefulness. The people in that room had learned me. North Star formally withdrew from the acquisition the following Monday. Without the brand rights, protected systems, or staff continuity, the transaction no longer made financial sense. North Star also demanded reimbursement for the due diligence costs incurred because of the false ownership disclosures. My parents tried to find another buyer for the building. They could not market it as Calder House. The copper sign came down 2 weeks later. I was not there. Mason and Camille postponed the wedding. 3 months later, Camille returned the ring permanently. Mason called me twice. I answered the second time. He did not say hello. "Did you plan to tell me about the scholarship?" "Yes." "When?" "When I could tell you without making your ignorance the center of my pain." He was quiet. "I really did not know." "I believe you. That does not make me innocent." "No." Another silence. "I took credit for things you did." "Yes. I thought that was how our family worked." "It was. I should have questioned it." "Yes." He exhaled. "I do not know how to fix 12 years. You may not be able to fix them. You can stop repeating them." We did not become close. He found work outside the restaurant industry. 6 months later, he contacted a magazine that had once described him as Calder House's creative force. He requested a correction. The correction named me as the creator of the menus and operating systems. It was 3 sentences on a website. It did not restore 12 years. But it was the first time Mason returned credit without being forced. My parents sold the old fire station 11 months after the rehearsal dinner. The buyer converted it into offices and apartments. My mother called that destruction. I thought about Rose's letter. Buildings are not always homes. I kept the Calder House trademark, but I did not reopen under that name. People assumed I had fought for the brand because I wanted to preserve it forever. A name can carry history. It can also carry debt. Rose and Salt opened 9 months after the dinner. We had 14 tables, a glass roof, a fig tree, and a kitchen so small that 2 people could not open opposite refrigerator doors at the same time. The first week was chaos. The oven failed during service. A pipe leaked behind the bar. Benji forgot to order dish soap. I oversalted a sauce because I was answering a delivery question while tasting it. We were not perfect. We were ours. Rosemary biscuits arrived in chipped blue bowls. Not because imperfection was part of a marketing strategy. Because people relaxed when the dishes did not appear too precious to touch. The menu listed Rose's roasted carrot soup under its original name. Beneath it were the words, "Created by Rose Calder. Preserved by Elena Calder. Prepared by the team at Rose and Salt." No one's work disappeared. After 6 profitable months, profit sharing began. Every employee could review the same financial reports. No hidden restructuring plan. No promises made in private and broken in public. Mateo and I argued regularly. About menu length. Staffing. Whether figs belonged in a savory tart. The arguments were direct. Sometimes loud. Then, we made decisions and ate together. I learned that conflict without manipulation did not feel like war. My parents never visited. My mother sent one card on the anniversary of Rose's death. She wrote that she hoped time would help me remember the good years. I did remember them. That was not the same as returning. Healing did not require me to repaint the past in softer colors. There had been good moments. There had also been theft, manipulation, silence, and love made conditional on usefulness. Both were true. I did not reply. Rose's brass pear timer now sits beside the kitchen pass at Rose and Salt. It no longer keeps accurate time. Sometimes it rings 2 minutes early. Sometimes it does not ring at all. We keep it anyway. Not every object has to remain useful to deserve a place. That may be the most important thing Rose ever left me. For most of my life, I believed value had to be proven through labor. I believed rest had to be earned. I believed love could be secured by anticipating everyone's needs before they spoke. I believed that if I became indispensable, no one could abandon me. But being indispensable did not make me safe. It made me convenient. The night my family tried to sell Calder House, they believed the most important question was who owned the restaurant name. It was not. The most important question was whether I finally understood that I owned my own name, my own work, my own future, and my right to leave any table where the only chair offered to me came with a contract. When did you finally stop carrying a responsibility your family had placed on your back? Tell me in the comments. And subscribe to Calm Deception Stories for more stories about betrayal, quiet strength, and the moment invisible work finally receives a name.